The shepherd's wife found the dying man in her own sheepfold at first light. He had crawled there bleeding, a stranger with a ball through his thigh, and below him on the gorse line his horse lay dead. In his left hand, closed tight, was a small silver ring. Mary Carew stopped in the gate with the dog at her heel and did not move. She had walked up the hill that morning the way she walked it every morning, before the light was fully grey, counting the breath in her own chest against the cold. 4 years she had walked this path. She knew its every stone. There had never been a man in her fold before. The man's coat was good cloth, soaked dark from the hip down, and his face had gone as grey as the frost. She thought he was dead. Then his hand moved. The dog growled low, and she put her own hand down, flat on its head, and the sound stopped. She crossed the fold. Her sheep had drawn away to the far wall and stood watching, their breath smoking, and she stepped past them and knelt in the man's blood without thinking about her skirt. He was breathing, barely, a thread of it, in and out, with a catch each time as though the cold had got into the breath itself. "Can you hear me?" she said, in Welsh, and then again in English when his eyes did not open. His lips moved. No sound came. She put her hand to the wound and he made a sound then, a thin, broken sound, and she drew the soaked cloth back from his leg and saw the torn flesh and the dark welling, and knew the bull was still in him. She had seen sheep shot by careless men on the high ground. She had never seen it in a man. His eyes opened, grey, like the morning, and not seeing her. "Henry," he said. Just that. A name. Not her name, not any name she knew. "Henry." "There is no Henry here," she said. "There is only me. Lie still." He did not lie still. He tried to rise, and the leg would not hold, and he went down again against the stone, and the ring fell from his hand and rang once on the frost and lay there, small and bright, between them. She picked it up. She did not know why. She closed it in her own fist and put her shoulder under his arm. "Stand," she said. "You will have to walk. I cannot carry you, and you cannot stay here. Stand up and walk." He stood. God knew how. He came up off the stone with his weight all on her, and his breath sawing at her ear, and the two of them went out through the gate together, 3 legs between them that would bear weight, and the dog circling, and the dead horse below them in the gorse with the frost already on its open eye. The cottage was 3/4 of a mile north and a mile above the village. She had walked it 10,000 times. She had never walked it slower. She got him onto the deal table in the kitchen end because the table was the only thing in the house long enough and high enough to work at, and because the bed was Bethan's, and the child was still asleep behind the chimney and did not need to wake to this. The fire was banked. She built it up. She put the big kettle on and the small one beside it, and while the water came, she cut his breeches away from the wound. With the lambing knife she kept clean and sharp on its nail by the door. The wound was bad. It was not the worst thing she had seen. She told herself that, kneeling there, and made herself believe it because belief was the only tool she had that morning that would not run out. The ball had gone in the outer thigh and lodged against the bone. She could feel it when she pressed, a hardness where no hardness should be, and the man groaned, and his hand came up and gripped the edge of the table until the knuckles stood white. "I have to take it out," she said. "Do you understand me? It cannot stay in you. It will fester and you will die. I have to take it out, and I have nothing to give you for the pain. Do you understand?" His grey eyes found her face. For the first time they seemed to see her. "Take it out," he said. So she did. It took a long time. She had a pair of iron pincers Huel had once used on the sheep, scrubbed clean in the boiling water, and she went after the bull with her arm braced hard across his leg, and her own hand shaking before it was done. He did not cry out. That was the strange thing. He made the low, broken sound twice, and then he was quiet, biting down on the leather strap she put between his teeth, and the sweat ran off him in the cold kitchen until his hair was wet through. The bull came out at last, a grey, misshapen thing, smaller than she expected, sitting in the cup of the pincers. She set it on the table beside the ring and looked at the two of them, the thing that had nearly killed him, and the thing he had carried, and did not understand either one. She packed the wound with clean linen boiled and wrung and bound it tight. She washed the blood from her arms. The light was full grey now at the small window, and the frost was beginning to let go of the glass. The man had fainted somewhere near the end. His breathing had changed, gone deeper. The catch in it eased, and she stood over him a long moment with her scalded hands hanging at her sides. "Aunt Mary." Bethan stood by the chimney, 9 years old and barefoot, her eyes very large in the firelight, looking at the man on the table. "Who is he?" the child said. "I do not know," Mary said. That was the truth. "He is hurt. He came onto the hill in the night, and he is hurt, and we are going to keep him warm and let him sleep. Go and put your shoes on. The fire is good now." "Is he going to die?" Mary looked at the man, at the grey of his face that was a little less grey than it had been. "Not today," she said. "Shoes." The fever came that night, as she had known it would. She had nursed fever before. She had nursed Howell through a winter of it once, the year they were married, before the droving took him for good. And she had nursed her sister Era through worse and lost her anyway, not to fever, but to the child that came wrong. She knew the country of fever the way she knew the hill. She knew where the bad ground was. The man burned. By midnight his skin was dry and hot, and he talked, low and broken, in a fine man's English she could only half follow, and the name came again and again out of the talk, like a stone the same stream keeps turning up. "Henry, Henry." He fell. I saw him fall. I was on the lower path, and I saw him go over, and I did not call out in time. Mary sat by him with the cool cloth and wiped his face, and did not understand, and went on wiping. "There is no Henry here," she said to him low, the way you talk to a feverish child or a frightened ewe, words for the sound and not the sense. "You are safe. You are on the Black Mountain in a warm house, and there is a fire, and a girl asleep, and a dog at the door, and you are safe. Sleep now. Rest." He quieted at her voice. He did not at her silence. So she talked. Through the long middle of the night, she talked. In Welsh, mostly because Welsh came easier, and he could not follow either tongue, and she told him things she had told no one. She told him about the path, about how she had walked it 4 years now, up at light and down at dusk, counting the flock, and how every morning for the first year she had got to the top of the rise where you could see south down the long valley toward England, and had stood there a moment looking at the road her husband had walked away on. Hewell Carew, a drover. He had taken the long autumn drove south to Smithfield in the October of 1828, with 60 head of black cattle and 3 other men, and the dog's own sire trotting at his heel, and he had not come back. In the spring the minister had a letter, brought up by a Bristol man who had known Howell, and the letter said robbery, a ford road below Tewkesbury, a body never found. Never found. She had turned the words over 4 years and never worn them smooth. "They could not even give me a grave," she said to the burning stranger. 4 years I have walked a hill looking at a road, and somewhere far down that road in England there is a piece of ground with my husband in it, and no stone and no name, and I will never stand on it. Do you know what that is? To have nowhere to put your grief down, to carry it up and down a hill every day, because there is no ground that will hold it. The man's hand moved on the blanket. She thought it was the fever. Then his fingers found the edge of her sleeve and closed, weak, like Bethan's hand in sleep. She let him hold it. Fever. A lie of the body, fever was. It made a man reach for whatever was warm and call it by the name he wanted. She knew that. She let him hold her sleeve anyway, through the worst of the night, because her own arm was the only warm thing in reach, and she would not be the one to pull it back. The fever lasted the better part of a week. A rhythm came into the house, the way a rhythm comes into any house where there is illness and work both, and neither one can be set down. Mary walked the hill at first light, to count the flock, and was back before the porridge was cold. Bethan kept the fire and brought the water and sat by the man with the cloth when Mary was out, grave and careful, a small nurse with her tongue between her teeth. The dog learned the man and stopped growling. There were hours in that week Mary would not have wanted anyone to see. Hours in the dead middle of the night when the man's fever climbed and the kettle hissed, and the wind found every gap in the old stone walls, and she sat with her hands raw from the boiled linen, and a tiredness in her that went past the body into some older place. She thought about how strange it was, that she had built her whole life since the letter on the keeping of a distance, the flock at arm's length, the parish at arm's length, the offers of decent men at arm's length, the child the only warm thing she let close, and the child she loved, with a care she kept careful, because she had learned what it cost to need a thing that the world could take down a road and not bring back. And now there was a stranger on her table whose face she had not chosen, whose name she did not fully have, and she was sitting up the nights for him with a fierceness she did not understand and did not like and could not stop. It frightened her more than the fever did. She told herself it was only the work. A thing half saved must be saved the rest of the way, or the saving was wasted, and she did not waste. She told herself she would have done the same for any creature that crawled bleeding into her fold, man or hound or hill pony, and that when he was mended and gone she would go back to her distance and her flock and her path and be glad of the quiet. It was a lie. She knew it was a lie the same way she had known his poacher story was a lie, by the shape it made around the truth it was hiding. But it was a useful lie that week, and she kept it the way you keep a fire banked, not for the warmth of it, but because letting it go out entirely was the thing she could not yet afford. On the third day the wound was angry, and Mary opened it and cleaned it and packed it fresh, and the man's fever spiked that night so high she thought she would lose him. On the fourth day it broke. She knew the moment it broke. She had her hand on his chest, feeling the heat of him, and the heat let go all at once into a flood of sweat, and his breathing changed and went easy, and she sat back on the stool and put her own face in her scalded hands and shook for a while, quietly, so as not to wake the child. When she took her hands away, his eyes were open and they were seeing her. Grey eyes, clear now, watching her with a tired, level attention that she felt go through her like the cold goes through a wall. "You have been weeping," he said. His voice was a ruin, but the words were a gentleman's, careful and plain. "I have not," she said. "You have." A pause while he gathered breath. "You walked the hill." It was such a strange thing to say. She did not know how he knew it. Perhaps he had heard her go out in the grey, the door and the dog, day after day through the fever. Perhaps it was only a thing a sick man says. But it landed in her like a hand laid flat on the exact place that hurt, because no one had ever named it back to her before, that she walked the hill, that the walking was the thing. "Someone has to count the sheep," she said. The ghost of something crossed his mouth, not a smile, the place a smile would go. "Where am I?" he said. "My house, on the black mountain above Landauxant. You were shot and left on the hill, and I found you in my sheepfold 5 days ago, with a ball in your leg and your horse dead below you." She watched his face. "Who shot you?" The watching went out of his eyes, a door closing. "Poachers," he said. "I disturbed poachers in the dark. They took fright." It was a lie. She knew it was a lie, the way she knew weather, the way she knew which ewe was going to be trouble at lambing before the ewe knew it herself. Poachers spooked in the dark do not put a single ball clean through a man's thigh and kill his horse under him and leave him. Poachers run. And a poacher's musket does not leave a man with a fine Welsh cast ring closed in his fist that he carries like the last warm coal in the world. She did not say any of that. "Poachers," she said. "Then you were unlucky." "Yes. You will be unluckier still if the wound turns again, so you will lie there and not move and not be a fool. What is your name?" He hesitated. She saw the hesitation and filed it with the lie. "Hugh," he said. "My name is Hugh." Not the whole of it. She could hear that too, the way a thing said is shaped around the things not said. But a man was allowed his name in pieces, in her house, while he could not yet stand. "Murray," she said. "Carew. The girl is Bethan, my sister's child. The dog has no name worth saying in English. Sleep, Hugh. You are not done mending." She did not press him. The brief said she would not, and she did not, though the brief was not a thing she had ever read. She pressed no wounded thing past what it could bear, man or beast, because pressing was how you lost them. But she watched. She watched his hands. They were a gentleman's hands, soft where work would have made them hard, but there was a band of harder skin across the right palm that came from a sword hilt or a rein held long and hard, and his nails were clean, and his cuffs, where she had cut them away, had been the kind of linen she had seen once in her life, at a distance, on a lord at the Landovery fair. She watched the ring. She had put it on the dresser by the Welsh Bible the first morning, and he had asked for it the moment he could speak clearly, asked for it sharp, with a fear in it, and she had given it to him, and he had closed it in his fist again, and something in him had eased. A man does not fear for a thing the way he feared for that ring unless the thing is grief made small enough to carry. She knew that fear. She had it herself. Hers was a walking stick in the corner by the door, Hywel's last gift to her, and she had never let anyone move it from that corner in 4 years. On the 4th night of his mending, the 8th night since the fold, the talking happened that she would remember the rest of her life. The child was asleep. The kettle was on for the morning. Mary sat by the hearth with her mending, and the man lay propped on the bench bed she had made him by the fire, and the silence in the house was the deep kind, the kind that asks to be filled. "You said a name," she said into the fire, not looking at him. "In the fever. You said it more than any other word. Henry." The man was quiet so long she thought he would not answer. "My brother," he said at last. "He fell. You said he fell. You said you saw him fall and did not call out in time." She heard him breathe, a long breath, drawn against something. "He was 23, Hugh said. I was 13. We were on this hill, these hills, this mountain, 8 years ago, an autumn morning, much like the one you found me on. He rode up to a high field on a horse that was too much for the ground, and I was below him on the lower path, and the horse came down at a place where the gorse hides the broken edge, and he went over." A pause. "I saw it. I was 13, and I saw my brother thrown, and I screamed, but the screaming did not reach him in time, and would not have changed it if it had. He was dead before I climbed to him. I held his head in the gorse until the men came." Mary had set down her mending. She did not remember doing it. "They buried him here," Hugh said, "at the little church down in the village. St. Sinwyl. My father would not come. From the day my brother died until the day my father died this spring, 7 years, he never once spoke my brother's name aloud in our house. Not once. He let a son lie 8 winters in Welsh ground 150 miles from his own people because he could not make himself come back to the hill that took him, and he forbade the rest of us the name as though the name were the wound." "And you," Mary said, "what did you do?" "I learned not to say it. I was good at learning." The fire cracked. "I came back to say it. That is why I am on this hill. I came to buy the farm where he fell and to lift the stone at the church and to take my brother home at last and put him with his own and to say his name over the doing of it as many times as it wants saying, because my father would not and someone in this world ought to." The house was very quiet. Mary looked at him then, full, across the firelight, this stranger who had crawled into her fold half dead with grief made into a ring in his hand, and she understood him the way you understand a thing in your own language for the first time, after hearing it long in a strange one. "I will tell you mine then," she said, "since you have told me yours." And she told him, Hywel, and the drove, and the road south, and the body never found. She told it plain, the way she had told it to him in the fever when he could not hear, except now he could. "You walked the hill looking at the road," he said, when she was done. "You told me. In the fever. I heard it the way you hear things under water. You walk it every morning. I do. For 4 years. For 4 years." He looked at the fire a while. Then he said, "Quiet. We are the same animal, you and I. We are both walking a hill toward a grave we cannot reach. Yours is on a road in England. Mine was here all along, and I let 7 years go by before I came for it." Mary did not answer that. There was no answer to it. It was simply true. It was the child who broke it. Bethan had not been asleep or had woken, and she came out from behind the chimney in her shift and stood between them in the firelight, and she said, in her careful child's English, looking at the man, "My mam saw your brother." Both of them went still. "Bethan," Mary said. "She did." The child was not to be stopped now. "My mam was Ira. She was 9, like me, and she was on the low path with the lambs, and a man on a horse stopped and lifted her up in front of him to be warm, and he kissed the top of her head, and then he rode up the hill, and she walked home to the high field, and from the high field an hour after she saw him fall. She told me. Every Sunday after chapel she took me to the place, and told me. She said someone should remember it kindly because nobody else did." The child's lip trembled. "She died when I was 7, but I know the place. I could walk to it now in the dark. There is another ring there. She said there was a ring caught in the roots where his hand went and nobody ever found it, because nobody ever looked but us. Mary watched the man's face come apart and put itself back together. He looked at the ring in his own hand. He opened his fingers and held it out on his palm into the firelight so the child could see it. "Like this one," he said. His voice was not steady. "Was it like this one?" Bethan came closer and looked. "The same," she said. "Exactly the same. My mam said it was a poor man's silver, but it was cut beautiful. The same as that." "They were a pair," Hugh said. "My mother had them cast for the two of us, my brother and me, by a Welshman in Carmarthen, the year before he died. I have worn mine on a thong against my heart for 8 years, and I have his. I took his from the dead. I would not leave it in the gorse, and I thought I had them both." He closed his hand. "But this is mine, and his is on the hill. He must have had a second, or I am holding mine, and his is the one your mother saw, and I never knew there was a third. I do not know. I only know the child is telling the truth, because no one could invent the way it was cut. I will take you," Bethan said. "When your leg is better, I will walk you to the place." "Yes," Hugh said. "You will. Thank you, Bethan. Thank you for remembering my brother kindly, when no one of his own would." The child nodded, satisfied, the great weight of her mother's errand finally laid on the right shoulder, and went back to her pallet behind the chimney, and was asleep, the way children are, in minutes. Mari sat in the firelight with the 2 grown Greeks of grief banked between them like coals, and did not say anything for a long time. "Henry," she said at last, gently, giving him the word. "Henry," he said back, and it came easier the second time, and a third, "Henry." And on the third his face did the thing she had been waiting a week to see it do, which was to let go. His leg mended slowly. He could stand on the 6th day, and cross the room on a stick on the 7th, and on the morning of the 7th day, while the frost still held, the thing happened that Mari had been dreading without knowing its shape. A knock at the cottage door, and a woman on the threshold with a small boy's hand in hers, and the boy's face bruised yellow and green along the cheek. Mari knew her a little, Branwen Lewis, from over near Trants Court, the wife of Cadog Lewis, who had a small holding there. A hard-working woman, not given to calling. "I will not come in," Branwen said. Her eyes went past Mary into the house, found the man by the fire and came back, and Mary understood that the woman had known before she knocked exactly who would be sitting there. "I will not come in, and you will not say I was here. But I have a thing in my apron, and you are to have it, and then I am to have gone back over the hill and called on no one." She took her hand from her apron, and there was a folded paper in it, much creased. "My Cadog is not a bad man," Branwen said, low and fast, with the boy pressed to her skirt. "He is a frightened man and a poor one, and a poor frightened man does what a rich one tells him for 6 guineas when there is a winter coming and no rent paid. But he hit the boy on the night before. In his fear of what he had agreed to do, he turned and he hit our boy across the face with the back of his hand, and that I cannot have. A man who would do murder for a great one and come home and strike his own child. I cannot have it, so you are to have the letter, and God forgive me for the man I married, and God forgive him too." Mary took the paper. She did not open it on the doorstep. "Who?" she said. "Who is the great one?" Branwen Lewis looked at her, and then up the hill toward the west, toward Landalo, and did not say the name, but her face said it, and Mari felt the cold of it settle into her chest under the older cold of the morning. "It is all in the writing," Branwen said. "It is his own hand. He was fool enough to write it down. Read it, and then burn it, or do not. But do not say it came from me, for my boy's sake." She gathered the child. "I have not been here." She walked back over the hill. Mary watched her go until the gorse took her, the small bruised boy stumbling at her side, and then she shut the door and brought the letter to the fire and opened it, and Hugh read it over her shoulder. The two of them bent to the firelight together. It was a single sheet. No greeting. A man's hand, educated, impatient. It named the gorse line above a farm called Panty Glyn. It named the dawn of a day. It named 4 muskets to be taken from a gun-room. It named 6 guineas apiece on the completion of the matter. It promised pulled rent for life on a small holding. And at the foot of it, plain as a brand, it was signed with a name and a title. Sir Vavasour Trant. Hugh straightened up off the stick. The blood had gone out of his face, but it was not the fever this time. It was the other thing, the cold, clean thing that fever counterfeits. "I know that name," he said. "Probert warned me of him. Trant, the magistrate at Llandelo. He owns the slate quarry that runs up against Pantyglyn, the farm where Henry fell, the farm I came to buy." He spoke it out slow, fitting it together as he said it, like a man laying stones. "His quarry is failing. There is one good cut of slate left in it, and it is not in his ground, it is in mine, in the farm. He cannot buy the farm in the open market, and he cannot afford to be seen to want it. So he meant to have it cheap at a forced sale, through a cousin, the moment the surveyor's valuation came in low and the estate let it go." His grey eyes came to her. "And then I came, the one man living who his own mother named, in her own hand, as the man the farm must go to. The one man who would walk onto that ground and see the slate cut for himself, and understand in a heartbeat why a bankrupt baronet would want a Welsh sheep farm. So he paid 4 frightened men 6 guineas each to make me into a hunting accident on the hill where my brother died." "And leave you for the cold to finish," Mary said. "And leave me for the cold to finish." She looked at the letter in her hand, at the signature, at the careful, impatient, terrible hand of a man who had been so sure of himself that he had written it down. "There is worse than you know," Hugh said quietly. "Think on it. Trant is the magistrate, the senior magistrate of this whole parish. To everyone down the hill, I am a missing nobleman. My horse found dead, my blood on the gorse, my surveyor's gear scattered down the gully. And the man whose right it is to sign the order that says I am dead, presumed dead, drowned on the hill dead, so that the farm can begin to be sold, is the same man who tried to make me dead. He has only to wait a week, sign his own order, and take the slate under his cousin's name. And you, Marie." He stopped. "You are the one person living who has seen me alive since the gorse line. You are the inconvenient one now." The fire ticked. Outside, the hill was white and silent. "Then he will come here," Mary said. "Yes." "As a magistrate, with a right to come?" "Yes." She folded the letter very carefully along its old creases, and put it inside the cover of the Welsh Bible on the dresser, between the word and the board, where no man takes a thing without asking. "Let him come," she said. He came at dusk the next day. Mary heard the carriage before she saw it, wheels on the frozen track where no carriage ever came, and she had time to send Bethan out to the byre with the dog, and to set the bar across the door of the back room where Hugh lay, before the knock came, 3 slow strokes of a stick on the wood, like a man who has never once in his life waited at a door. She opened it. Sir Vavasour Trant stood on her threshold, a big, handsome, ruined man of middle age, with a soft voice and small eyes that went past her into the house before they ever rested on her face. "You are the Carew woman," he said, in English, "the shepherd's widow." "I am the shepherd's wife," Mary said. The small eyes came back to her, a flicker of something at the correction, and went past her again. "I am Sir Vavasour Trant, the magistrate for this parish. I am making inquiry after a gentleman lost on the mountain some days since, a person of the highest quality, missing, his horse found dead. It is my duty to call at every house on these hills. You will let me look through yours." "There is nothing in my house but my niece and my flock and myself," Mary said. "But it is cold, and you have come a long way for your duty. Will you take tea?" She said it in Welsh first, the offer of tea, knowing he would not follow it, and wanting to see him not follow it, and she watched the small eyes flatten with the small contempt of a man for a tongue he has decided is beneath him, and she had the measure of him then entirely. "I do not take tea," Sir Vavasour said in English, "in shepherds' cottages. Stand aside. I will look." "Look then," she said, and stood aside. He looked. He went through the kitchen end with his lantern boy, lifting the lid of the meal chest with his stick, putting the stick into the dark of the box bed, and Mary stood by the dresser with her hand resting on the Welsh Bible, and her heart going like a hare's and her face like the hill. He came to the back-room door. He tried it. It was barred. "What is in here?" "The store," Mary said. "Seed and tools and the year's wool. It bars because the damp gets at the door and swells it. You have to put your shoulder to it in winter. Put your shoulder to it if you like. I cannot move it from this side." It was a thin lie, and she knew it was thin, and she stood with her hand on the Bible and waited to see if a baronet who had paid for murder would put his shoulder to a swollen door. And he looked at the door and looked at her, and something in the way she stood, the stillness of her, the not caring, turned him. "I have no quarrel with your wool," he said. "Keep your store." He went to the door. On the threshold he turned, and the small eyes went over her once more, head to foot, the way a man prices a beast. "You live very alone up here, Carew woman," he said. "On the open hill. A woman alone is a frail thing in a hard winter. You would do well to have a friend in the parish, a man of standing, who could see that no harm came to you or to the child." A pause. "I am such a friend to those who are wise. Think on it." "I will think on it," Murray said. He went. The carriage turned with difficulty in the narrow track and went down the hill, the lantern swinging, and Mary stood in the open door until the light of it was gone into the dark, and then she shut the door and put the bar across and went and let Hugh out of the back room, and the two of them looked at each other and neither one said anything because there was nothing yet to say. He had not found them. That was all. He had not found them today. He would come again. He came again on the second day after, and this time he did not come alone, and this time he came with the law in his hand. The parish constable was with him. Traherne, a decent enough man from Landovery, who did not know yet what he was a part of, and Sir Vavasour had a paper, and the paper was a warrant, signed by himself, to search the cottage of Mary Carew on suspicion of the harbouring of a fugitive person of the parish. Mary saw them come up the White Hill from a long way off, and she had time, but not much. She did not send Hugh to the back room this time. The back room would not hold against a warrant and a constable. Instead, she did a thing she had decided on in the night. Lying awake, listening to the wind, she made ready to meet it at the door with the truth in her hand, because the truth was the only wall she had left that Trant could not climb. And then, as the two men came up through the gorse, a third figure came over the shoulder of the hill from the west, half running, a woman with her shawl flying and something held in the cup of her apron, and Mary's heart turned over because she knew the figure. Branwen Lewis, the small bruised boy stumbling behind her. They all reached the cottage gate within a minute of each other, the magistrate and the constable from below, the smallholder's wife from the west, and Mary opened her door and stood in it, and behind her in the kitchen Hugh got up off the bench and stood, on his stick, in plain sight, alive. Sir Vavasour saw him through the open door and stopped as though he had struck the wall of the house. For one moment the careful, soft-voiced face was nothing but a dead man's face looking at a dead man, all the colour gone, the small eyes wide and white-rimmed. Then he gathered himself. Mary watched him do it, watched the magistrate's robe of manner come down over the murderer, and it was the most frightening thing she had ever seen, that a man could do that fast. "Constable," Sir Vavasour said, "here is the fugitive. Here is the man missing from the parish, harboured these many days by this woman without report, against her plain duty. Take him. Take them both." "I am no fugitive," Hugh said, from inside, plainly, on his stick. "I am Hugh Lansdale, 8th Duke of Carwin, and I was shot on the gorse line above Pantyglyn at dawn on the 17th of November by 4 men with muskets, and left for the cold, and this woman pulled me from her own sheepfold half dead, and has kept me alive at the risk of her life. Constable, look at my leg if you doubt the shot, and then ask Sir Vavasour Trant where he was on the 17th, and where his gun-room muskets were, and what his hand was doing on the 15th. "He is raving," Sir Vavasour said. "Fever." "Constable." "It is no fever," Branwen Lewis said. She had come up to the gate. She stood there with the boy against her and her chest heaving from the hill, and she put her hand into her apron, and she held out the folded paper, not the one she had given Mary saw, a second one, or the same kind, his hand, his sign, and her voice when it came was loud and cracked and carried clear across the frozen yard. "It is no fever, and that man is no fugitive, and I am Branwen, wife to Cadog Lewis, and here in this paper is Sir Vavasour Trant's own writing in his own hand, telling my husband and 3 other men where to stand, and when to fire, and what they would be paid for the murder of a duke. 6 guineas. He wrote it down, and my husband took the money and came home and struck our son in his fear. And look at the boy's face, look at it, and ask yourselves what kind of a great man pays poor men to do his killing, and then is not even man enough to be feared by his own conscience. Constable Traherne. You know me. Read it. The constable took the paper. He read it. Mary watched his decent, ordinary face change as he read, watched the thing dawn in him, and when he had read it he looked up, not at Hugh, not at Marie, but at the magistrate beside him whose warrant was still in his other hand, and he took one slow step back from Sir Vavasour Trant, as a man steps back from the edge of a thing. "Sir Vavasour," the constable said. His voice was not steady. I think you had best not say any more. I think this is past me. I think this wants the assize." The warrant, the one Sir Vavasour had signed himself, fluttered down out of the magistrate's hand and lay in the trodden snow of Marie's yard, and no one picked it up. After that it went fast, and most of it went on without her, down the hill, in the places where men settle the business of other men. The Duke's solicitor came up from London on a note in the Duke's own hand. Mr. Adam Lacey, a sharp, grey, careful man who arrived at Landovery and took rooms at the Bear and set to work like a man clearing a field. Within a few days the 4 paid men were taken. Cadog Lewis gave his deposition to the constable, every line of it, the 4 men and the 6 guineas and the muskets and the dawn and the order to leave the Duke for the cold. The other 3 were taken on his word, and the cousin, the bankrupt cousin in Landovery, Mr. Glanmore, who was to have bought the farm cheap, when Mr. Lacey laid the whole ruin in front of him and offered him clemency for the truth, he turned and gave up the partnership agreement of 2 years before in Trant's own hand, naming the farm and the slate cut and the price they meant to steal it at. And there was the apothecary's book at Landovery, where Trant had been fool enough to buy 2 pounds of powder and 4 pounds of shot in the first week of November, signed for, in his own hand, far more than any sporting man could explain. The man had written everything down. That was the strange truth of him, Mary thought, when Hugh told her each new piece of it by the fire of an evening. A man so certain of his own greatness that it had never once occurred to him that the small frightened people around him could read. But there was one piece that was not done by lawyers, and it was hers and the child's. On a clear cold morning, when Hugh could ride a little if he was helped up, Bethan led them to the place. She walked ahead the child, up the long hill to the west to Panty Glyn and the gorse line above it, sure-footed as a goat, turning back now and then to see that the slow Duke and the old surveyor Mr. Probert were keeping up, and Mary kept beside Hugh and steadied him on the steep ground. It was the same hill. Mary understood that fully for the first time as they climbed, that the farm where Henry Lansdale had died, and the high ground where she walked her own flock, and the road far to the south where her own husband lay in unmarked ground, were all one hill, one long body of land that took men away and did not give them back, and that the 3 of them climbing it were all, in their different ways, walking it for the dead. Bethan stopped at a place in the gorse where the broken edge was, where you could see how a horse might come down at it if the rider did not know. "Here," she said. "My mum said here." "The roots," she said. His hand went into the roots. Hugh got down off the surveyor's arm and knelt, his bad legs straight out behind him, and put his hand into the cold tangle of gorse root at the broken edge, feeling. His face turned away, and Mary held her breath, and the child held hers, and the old surveyor took off his hat without seeming to know he had done it. Hugh's hand stopped, his shoulders changed. He drew his hand out of the roots, and in his fingers, black with 8 years of earth, was the ring. He cleaned it on his sleeve, slowly, and held it in his open palm beside the one from the thong at his neck, the pair of them side by side in the cold light, identical, a poor man's silver cut, beautiful by a Carmarthen Welshman the year before the elder brother died. "Henry," he said. He did not weep. Mary thought he was past the place where weeping lived, but he knelt there a long time in the gorse with his brother's ring in his hand and his brother's grave waiting down in the village, and at last he said, not to her, to the hill, "I will take you home. I am sorry it was 8 years. I will take you home." Bethan came and stood by him and put her small hand on his shoulder, the way her mother might have done, the woman who had been kissed on the head on this hill by a young man an hour before he died, and had carried it her whole short life, and given it to her daughter to carry on. "My mam will be glad," the child said simply. She did not like him being up here alone. It was Hugh who first spoke the marriage, and he spoke it not as a lover, but as a man laying out the only road across a flooded ford. It was the night before the assize. Mr. Lacey had come up the hill himself to set it before her, the lawyer's cold, clear reasons, and Hugh had sat by while the lawyer talked and had watched her face, and when the lawyer was done, Hugh had asked him courteously to go and wait at the gate, and then it was only the two of them and the fire. "You have heard his reasons," Hugh said. "I will give you mine, which are the same reasons in plainer words. Tomorrow they will try this at Carmarthen, and you are the heart of it, because you are the one living soul who saw me alive on that hill, and Trant's people will do everything in law to break your word. They will say you are a poor woman who would say anything. They will say your tongue is Welsh, and your trade is sheep, and your word is worth what such a word is worth. They will try to make the truth small by making you small." "Let them try," Mary said. "They might succeed," Hugh said gently. "That is the thing. They might. And there is the child. While Bethan is a parish child on the pauper line, a magistrate has wide power over her, where she lives, who keeps her, and Trant has friends still, even now, even taken. While you stand alone, he can reach you both. And if I do not stand alone, as Duchess of Carwin," Hugh said, "your word cannot be made small on the grounds of your trade or your tongue. As Duchess of Carwin you bring Bethan under your own standing, and lift her off the parish line for good, out of any magistrate's reach forever, and the settlement of the dukedom closes the door on the farm, on Pantyglyn, on the slate, on every contingent thing that Trant or any cousin of his could ever raise against it again. It ends it, all of it, in one stroke tomorrow morning, in the chapel, before we ever walk into the court." Mary looked at the fire a long while. "You are asking me to marry you," she said, "for the law." "I'm asking you to marry me for the law," Hugh said. "Yes. Tonight I will ask you only for that, because that is what tomorrow needs, and I will not dress it as more and have you think I am taking advantage of a debt. You saved my life. I will not pay that back by trapping you in a feeling you did not ask for. So I ask you plainly, for the law and for the child, and you may answer it plainly." Mary thought about the hill she had walked 4 years, about the path and the road and the grave she could not reach, about the small bruised boy and the bar across the door, and the small eyes pricing her at her own threshold, about the man across the fire who had named her walking back to her on the morning his fever broke. You walked the hill, the only person in 4 years who had seen the thing for what it was. "For the law, then," she said. "And the child?" "Yes. Thank you," Hugh said. And that was all that was said that night. But when he had gone out to send the lawyer home, Mary sat by the fire a while longer, and she found she was not thinking about the law at all. They were married in the small chapel of St. Kynwyl at Llandau-Sant, at 2 minutes past 7 on the morning of the assize, in the grey before full light, by the old vicar Mr. Lewid, who had buried Henry Lansdale 8 winters before and kept his grave ever since. Mary wore her best black, which was her only black, and Hywel's, no. She wore the Welsh cast ring, Henry's ring, on a leather thong at her throat, because Hugh had asked her to carry it into the court that way, the 2 brothers' rings going together into the place where it would all be decided, one at his heart and one at hers. Hugh stood on his stick on the surveyor's arm. Bethan sat on Mary's brother Caleb's hip at the chancel rail, scrubbed and solemn in a clean pinafore. There were no flowers. There was no breakfast after. There was the old vicar's voice in the cold chapel and the words said and the register signed, and outside the chapel door, a few steps across the frosted yard, the slab over Henry Lansdale's grave, where Hugh had gone alone at first light, before the others came and stood 9 minutes without lifting his head. Then they went down to Carmarthen, to the Shire Hall on Knott Square, to the assize. The court was full. Mary had never been in such a room, high and cold and full of men, the judge up on his bench in red, Sir James Allen Park, an old man with a still face who had read the papers in the night, the jury, 12 Carmarthen freeholders in their box, the lawyers at their bar, the press of the newspapers in the side gallery with their pencils, and in the magistrate's enclosure of the public benches in his robes, expecting to be called only to deliver his routine half-yearly commission and be thanked for a quiet quarter. Sir Vavasour Trant. He did not know. That was the thing Mary understood as they waited in the cold antechamber for the case to be called. Trant had been taken, yes. The constable had stepped back from him in her yard. The lawyers had been busy, but the man was a magistrate and a baronet, and he had spent his whole life certain that such men do not, in the end, answer to such courts. And he had come to the assize this morning still half believing that his robe would carry him through, that a duke's word against his was a thing that could be managed, that a Welsh shepherd woman's word was no word at all. He did not know that the duke was alive and married and standing. At 10, the calendar was opened, and the old judge, who had read the brief in the night, called the case out of order on the duke's application as a matter of urgent public concern, and the door at the head of the chamber was opened, and the 8th Duke of Carwin walked living into the assize chamber on the arm of his duchess. Mary walked in beside him. She would not afterward be able to say how she walked it, that little distance from the door to the witness rail, with the whole cold high room turned to look, and the Duke's weight on her arm, and Henry's ring at her throat, and the silence falling like snow. She only knew that she walked it the way she had walked the hill 4 years, one foot and then the other, looking ahead, because that was the only way she had ever known to cross hard ground. Behind them came the others, Bethan on Caleb's arm, Mr. Probert with the surveying papers and the maps of the slate cut, old Mr. Llewyd with the burial book of 1825 and a small wrapped thing in his hands, Branwen Lewis with the autograph letter, Cadog Lewis under the constable's guard, and the other 3 in the dock, Mr. Glanmore at the witness rail with the partnership agreement, the apothecary with his purchase book, Mr. Lacey at the bar with the last and heaviest paper of all, the late Duke's own instruction, the father's hand at last laid down on the side of the son, and on a square of white linen on the table of the court, they laid the 2 rings side by side, Henry's and Hugh's. In the magistrate's enclosure, Sir Vavasour Trant sat and watched the dead man walk in, and the dead man's witnesses walk in after him, and the dead man's wife stand up at the rail, and Mary watched the certainty go out of his face the way the light had gone out of the warrant in the snow. The judge asked the Duchess of Carwin to speak, as the witness who had pulled the Duke from the cold, as the keeper of the child who had led the surveyor to the place. Mary stood at the rail. She did not look at the judge, nor at the jury, nor at the lawyers. She looked across the whole cold room to the man in the robes in the public benches, and she spoke to him, in plain English, that the whole court could follow, in a voice that did not shake because 4 years of weather on a hill teaches a voice not to shake. I have walked these hills 4 years for a husband whose body never came back from England. I walked them 4 hours yesterday morning to find his grace, where your men left him for the cold. The hills can decide whose hand was on the musket and whose name will be on the slate. The room was utterly silent. Then it was not hers any more. Then it belonged to the papers and the lawyers and the law, and they did the rest. The letter was read. The purchase book was opened on the table. Mr. Glanmore gave his evidence, and the partnership agreement was read out. The farm named, the slate cut named, the stolen price named. Cadog Lewis gave his, and the other 3 theirs. Old Mr. Llewyd unwrapped the small thing in his hands, which was Henry's ring from the gorse roots, and laid it by its pair, and told the court of a grave he had kept 8 winters for a family that had not come. And last Mr. Lacey laid before the judge the late 7th Duke of Carwin's own instruction, in the dead father's hand, that the farm of Panty Glyn was to go to his surviving son Hugh, and that under no circumstances was Sir Vavasour Trant of Landalo to be permitted any part of it, for a reason named on a second sheet, and the second sheet named Henry, and named the consent for the lifting of Henry's body that Sir Vavasour Trant had refused to give, 8 years before, out of the same small greed for the same small slate. The jury went out. They were gone 21 minutes. When they came back, the old judge in red took the verdict, and on the verdict, and on the evidence, and on the letter, and on the father's instruction, he committed Sir Vavasour Trant, taken there in his own magistrate's robes, in the enclosure where he had come to be thanked, by warrant of the Shire Hall to the jail at Carmarthen, on the charges of the attempted wilful murder of His Grace the 8th Duke of Carwin, of the conspiracy to defraud the Carwin estate of the farm of Pantyglyn, of the corruption of 4 subjects of the Crown, and of the abuse of his office. Mary stood at the rail and watched it happen and felt nothing she could have named. Not triumph. She had thought, in the bad nights, that there would be triumph in it, that to see the man brought down would close some wound. It did not. It only closed a danger. The grief underneath the danger was untouched, hers and Hugh's both, and would be there in the morning the way the hill was always there in the morning. A court could take a murderer to jail. It could not bring a body up off a road below Tewkesbury, nor put 8 years back into a brother's life. She had known that before she walked into the room. She knew it harder now. But the child was safe. That was the thing she held. Whatever else the law could not do, it had lifted Bethan off the parish line for good, out of any small, greedy man's reach forever, and that was worth the whole cold morning and more. They took him out by the side door. He did not look at Mary as he went. He had never, she thought, truly looked at her at all, not once from the first dusk on her threshold. He had looked past her into her house and priced her at her gate and offered to be her friend, and never once seen the woman who stood on the open hill in all weathers and was not afraid of him. That had been his whole mistake. From the gorse line to the jail, he had not believed the small people could see. The next morning, at first light, old Mr. Lewid lifted the stone at St. Sinwell, and they brought Henry Lansdale up out of the Welsh ground where he had lain 8 winters, and the Duke himself carried his brother's coffin to the carriage with his own hands, his bad leg and all, and would let no other man take the weight. Then they went south, 4 days on the road to the Carwin vault in the English Marches, and Mary and Bethan on the carriage seat the whole way, because Hugh had asked them to come and Mary had found she could not have stayed behind. They put Henry Lansdale in the vault with his own people at last, under his own marble, and Hugh stood over it and said the name aloud as many times as it wanted saying, which was the thing his father could not do, and Mary stood beside him and let him. And then, because there was nothing left undone in the south, they went back north to the hill. Midsummer, 1833. The light on the Black Mountain at midsummer was a different country from the light that had lain on the frost the morning Mary found the dying man in her fold. Long and gold and slow, it lay along the high ground until late, and the gorse was in its full yellow blaze, and the larks went up out of the heather all day. Sir Vavasour Trant had been tried at the Carmarthen Spring Assizes in March on all 4 counts, convicted on the letter and the cousin's evidence, and Branwen Lewis's word, and the dead father's instruction, and sentenced to transportation for life, and had sailed for Van Diemen's Land in May. The slate quarry stood closed, its gallery sealed, its workings sold to a Llanelli iron master for the timber. The farm of Pantyglyn, the Carwin estate, had bought at the open and honest valuation old Mr. Probert set, and it was a working sheep farm again now, on Mary's own instruction, stocked with the Cobb Mountain breed that had been Howell's own flock line, restored to its hill. Cadog Lewis, who had turned King's evidence, had served his 12 months and come out to a cottage on the Carwin land, and his wife Branwen kept the small dairy, and the boy whose bruised face had begun the unravelling ran with the other children of the estate with no mark on him at all, and at the gorse line above Pantyglyn, at the broken edge where a young man had gone down 8 years before, and where a child's mother had walked past him an hour earlier and been kissed on the head and remembered it her whole short life, there was a new stone. The Lan Deusant slate cutter had made it, to Mary's own design, Welsh on the south face and English on the north, the date of the fall and the date of the lifting, and 2 names cut into it, though only the one had ever lain in the parish ground, Henry Lansdale, and beneath it, at Mary's asking and Hugh's quiet consent, Hywel Carew, the husband whose body was somewhere on a road far to the south and would never come home, given a name on a hill at last, so that his wife should have, after 4 years, one piece of ground in the world where she could put her grief down. They walked up to it together on the evening of midsummer, the 2 of them, up the long upland path in the late gold light. Bethan was at the great house in the south with Mrs. Aldington, the old governess, learning her letters in 2 tongues, 10 years old now, and calling Hugh by his given name out loud, and calling Mary, at the Duchess's own asking, Mary Fy Modrib, Mary my aunt, And Mari was 6 months gone with the child that would come at Michaelmas, a boy, they thought, whose cradle Caleb had already carved out of Welsh oak, and she walked the steep path slowly now, and Hugh walked it slowly too on the leg that would always carry a little of the hill in it, and they were well matched at last in their slowness, the two of them, climbing. They stood at the stone together. They read the two names in the long light. They said Henry Lansdale aloud together, and then they said Hywel Carew aloud together, the living wife and the living brother naming the two dead men on the one hill, and the larks went up, and the gorse blazed, and the evening was wide and gold and gentle over all of it. "I never told you," Mary said, "what I felt in the court. When I said I walked the hill 4 hours to find you, I let them think it was only the truth. It was the truth, but it was not only." Hugh looked at her. "I had walked that hill 4 years and never wanted to find anything but my flock," she said. "And then one morning, there you were in my fold, and from that morning the walking changed, and I did not understand it until it was nearly too late to say. I was not afraid you would die, those first days, only because you were a man and I am a woman who saves things. I was afraid because it was you. I'd been so long with nowhere to put my grief, and you walked up out of the cold, and you were a man carrying his grief in his hand the way I carried mine in a stick by the door, and I knew you, the way you know your own tongue." Hugh was quiet a moment, there at his brother's stone in the gold light, with the hill all round them that had taken so much from them both. "I asked you for the law," he said, "because I would not trap you. I've been waiting 1/2 a year for you to tell me it was ever more than the law. I would have waited the rest of my life and never asked, because you had been asked for enough by men and given enough, and I would not be one more." "It was always more than the law," Mary said. He took her hand, he turned it over, the calloused shepherd's hand, and held it in both of his. Hugh said it then, the thing he had carried up the hill to say. "You walked these hills 4 years for him. I will walk them for both of you the rest of my own." The hill at the foot of the gorse line lay open under the midsummer light, the long gold valley falling away to the south toward England, toward the road, and Mari looked down it the way she had looked down it 10,000 mornings, and for the first time in 4 years she did not feel the road pulling at her, did not feel the unreachable grave at the far end of it, because the grief had a stone now, here, on the hill, with both their names on it, and she was not the one walking toward it alone. She was not walking toward it at all. She was standing still on the high ground in the last of the light, with her husband's hand in hers, and the child of them both quick beneath her heart, and another child learning her letters in the south, and the larks going up, and the whole hill turning gold around her. And for the first time since a letter came in a far-off spring she was not walking anywhere, because for the first time in 4 years she was already home.